back again, and we are in November. It's the second week of November. Getting pretty close to Halloween. Not Halloween. Why am I saying Halloween? Getting pretty close to Thanksgiving. And instead of talking about turkeys and what we're going to eat and all that, I kind of like to talk about a little bit of the history of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is an American holiday. They do not celebrate Thanksgiving anywhere else in the world. It is uniquely American holiday. It started back when the Pilgrims came over from England and started to settle the New World here over in where we live now in America. And they had a very difficult time. The winters were much harder and colder than they thought they would be. They had a hard time finding food to eat. They had a hard time keeping themselves well. And as a matter of fact, many of them did not make it. Many of the Pilgrims didn't live. They died because the conditions were just too rough. And after quite a while, they almost decided they just couldn't do it, and they were getting ready to pack up and move back to England. But then there were Native Americans that had been living on this land for thousands of years and very well. And they saw all the struggles that the Pilgrims were having, keeping themselves well, finding food for the winter, shelter, medicines when they got sick. And they decided that they were going to help the Pilgrims and teach them how to live on the land. They taught them how to hunt. They taught them how to where and what to plant for vegetables and fruit and things like that. They told them how they could store the food for the winter so they would have food throughout the year. They showed them different plants and other things that they could use for medicines when they got sick. They showed them the things to stay away from that would make them sick. They showed them how to use the natural resources around them so that they could not only survive but to thrive. So that's what they did. And they taught the Pilgrims, like I said, how to plant and when to harvest. Harvest means when the fruit and vegetables have ripened and it's time to pick. Well, their first harvest just happened to be in November. And they wanted to have a celebration and a dinner in order to thank the Native Americans for showing them how to survive. And by having them sit down for a dinner, a dinner of Thanksgiving. They were giving their thanks for their knowledge and teaching them how to survive. And so they shared with the Native Americans all the things that they had grown, the foods that they had grown. And so that originated into a holiday for Americans where we sit down in November, Thursday, the last Thursday of November, and we have Thanksgiving, where we sit with family and friends, and we talk about things that we are thankful for, and we usually have a feast, which includes some of the things that might have been on the original Thanksgiving feast. Usually, you think about turkeys, and you think about. I know my favorite's always the stuffing and the pies. But getting back to that, we all know about Thanksgiving, eating a turkey, sitting down with our family and friends. So I like to concentrate on the Native Americans. I find Native American culture and history very fascinating. So we've already talked about legends a little bit when we did the legend of Sleepy Hollow. So I'm going to go back to that and do a legend today called the Legend of the Blue Bonnet. And again, this is a story that has a little bit of truth to it, but we're not quite sure which is true and which isn't. This is a story that's been told over and over and over again for hundreds of years. And it's been, details have been added to make it a little bit more interesting. But this is, the Legend of the Blue Bonnet is a Comanche tale. Comanche is a Native American tribe, And a blue bonnet is an actual flower that grows wild all along the hills around Texas. And when you go, if you ever drove through Texas, in the springtime, the fields are covered with this beautiful blue flower, blue bonnet, or sometimes they're called lupines, and they grow wild. So this is the story of how people think that those blue bonnets got there. Again, there's a little bit of truth to it, but we're not quite sure which part is true. Now, last week we talked about theme. So I would say the theme for this story is about sacrifice, because when you hear the story, you'll understand that this little girl made a huge, huge sacrifice, which a sacrifice is when you give up something that is very important to you, maybe your time or money or something very important, and you sacrifice it for the greater good of other people. So she had an enormous sacrifice to help save her tribe. And you'll find out a little bit more about that. But today I want to focus also on something that good readers do, is that they make inferences. Now, an inference is kind of like a guess, but it's a guess. It's called kind of like an educated guess. So sometimes authors will write things in stories, and they know that you already know certain things. So they don't have to always spell she is sick or they are late. You can see that they are late, maybe but from the picture or from certain words that they say. They don't actually come out and say it, but you can guess what's going on based on things that you already know, maybe something that's happened to you, maybe something that you've seen or heard. So you can guess what's going on in the story based on your personal knowledge. So I'm going to hold up a few pictures, and the pictures don't have any words on them, but when you look at the picture, you know what's going on in the picture. You can tell based on either personal knowledge or something that's happened to you before, maybe something you've seen or read. That is called making an inference. So here's my first picture. Okay, picture number 1. What do you think's happening in this picture? So you see they've got the hats on. Generally, when you see these types of hats, someone has graduated, either from high school or college. You can see this young lady, she's got flowers. This young lady, she's got some kind of a book. We know that they're obviously happy. So based on my personal knowledge, I can tell that this picture that someone has graduated. These 2 girls have graduated from either high school or college, and they're extremely happy. Yeah. This picture looks like someone is giving someone else a gift. They're both happy. I'm guessing it's probably a birthday, because usually that's what happens. Someone gives you a gift on your birthday, and you're usually pretty happy about it. So I would infer that that's what's happening in this picture. Do a couple more. What do you think is? Would you want to go to the beach on this day? Of course not. We can infer that it is very cold outside. You can see the way he's dressed. You can see the snow in the picture. Without even saying a word, we know it's cold. Okay, let's look at this picture. What's going on here? You can see the bus is taking off. You can see the girl is running. You can see the look on her face. What do you think's happening in this picture? What can you infer? She is late, probably to work, because she's got some kind of a briefcase in her hand. So we know that she's missed her bus and now she's late. How are they feeling? Sick. So again, without writing a word down, you can tell by this picture that whatever's going on in the story, this person is sick, not feeling well. Okay, I'll do one last picture. Okay, I see. Looks like somebody's up in the air. This looks like it might be a puddle of water. I would guess that they probably slipped on some water and they're getting ready to fall. I know this because this has happened to me several times. Be very careful where you walk, because if you sometimes if you walk in a puddle of water, you might slip and fall. And looks like he's probably got some groceries in his hand. So I have done this, so I know exactly what's going on in this picture because I have personal experience. So those are just really easy examples of what making an inference is and means. It's just making a guess based on things that you already know. So sometimes an author doesn't come right out and tell you what's happening because they want you to guess. They want you to make an inference as to how someone is feeling or what is going on in the story, because they know that you already have personal knowledge on those certain things. So in our story today, you're going to be making some inferences about what's going on in the story, making some guesses. And just for fun, if you want to, the flower in the book is called a blue bonnet, or sometimes they're called lupines. So a lot of times, if you guys were here in school, we would make a paper lupine. So if you want to, you can do it at home if you have paper, crayons, or if you have access to maybe some colored paper. If not, you can just use your crayons. So you can start with a plain piece of paper. Now, lupines are very tall and skinny, and their leaves are at the bottom. And then they're kind of blue, sometimes purple, and then white at the top, but they're real tall and skinny. And the petals are really, really tiny. So I would start off by drawing a very tall stem with some of the branches going out, and my leaves are at the bottom. Then you can either color. These are torn paper where I've taken little pieces of paper, and I have glued them on, little pieces of green to cover the leaves, or little blue petals up at the top, so this would be completely full. So at the end, it might look something like this. This one I just colored in at the bottom. I added my torn paper, or if you have crayons, you can do that. This would just be a fun activity if you would like to go along with the story, The Legend of the Blue Bonnet. So I hope you enjoy the story as much as I do. And we will be talking, probably do another legend next week, another Native American legend. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again next week. Bye.